Hey there, it's Chad here. Welcome into another episode of A Level Deeper. Today I'm really excited to introduce you to a friend of mine, Dedra Janvier, who is really a special person. Eileen and I got to know Dedra and her partner Garen living in the van. They were also fellow van life travelers, and we met them in the San Diego area, traveled with them for a bit, split ways, and then ultimately ended up making the trek all the way to Alaska and back, caravanning with them the whole time for multiple months. It was during that trip that Dedra was telling us that she had these dreams to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. For those of you who are not familiar with the PCT, Dedra is going to tell you more about it, but to put it simply, Dedra walked this last summer in 2024. She walked from Mexico to Canada. You know, just a casual 5 months outside hiking. And if that isn't an impressive enough feat on its own, she did it alone. Now, as she's going to describe in our conversation, she wasn't truly alone the whole time. She met a trail family, and she'll tell you more about that. But it was really neat to get to experience and see Dedra leading up to this experience, and then kind of watch from afar as she did it and, pay attention through social media. But then it was really special for me to get to catch her within a month or so of her getting off the trail and have a conversation with her about, what was that process like? 5 months of hiking. Most days it was over 20 miles per day, going up and down different terrain and navigating water, and you're carrying everything on your back. I asked her about how she navigated some of the difficult moments and how did she make it through all of the challenging and trying things that happened over the course of this trail. What was going through her mind on some of these moments, and how did she will herself to finish this thing? It was cool to hear Dedra reflect on her intentions for this journey and what she learned afterward. And I just think it would be impossible to make it through this conversation and not feel incredibly inspired to go attack your dreams. So if you stick around and listen, you might just go do something great in your life. And that doesn't sound too bad, does it? All right, without further ado, here is my conversation with Dedra Janvier. I was first off just curious about how does it feel in this moment, knowing that you're going to reflect on this journey that you have been on this summer? I don't know. How does it feel right now in this moment?
I feel like I'm always battling between it never happened, it wasn't real, and holy shit, I did that. It's kind of like those two trains of thoughts that I'm always like, wow, I actually lived out sort of my dream that I had for many, many years. And I sit and I reflect and I think about all the stuff, and I'm like, that was actually incredible and such an amazing experience and a once in a lifetime experience. And then there's moments where I'm like, that wasn't real. It felt like, I never did that. I don't know. It's like this weird sort of train of thought. I kind of battle those two thought processes, honestly, all the time.
Well, I've got to imagine it's interesting because it's like what you did and what you spent months of your life doing is so different from normal, typical, everyday life that I could imagine there's some kind of, just kind of cognitive dissonance of that doesn't feel like it can be real. I was outside hiking for what, 5 months? I can imagine your brain just can have a really hard time kind of comprehending and understanding that, no, that was an actual real experience.
Yeah. And as we've chatted before in the past, because we've been friends for almost 2 years now, for me, I've always been the person that doesn't really wanted to ever live that typical 9 to 5 normal lifestyle. So doing the PCT wasn't kind of super crazy, I guess, in the grand scheme of things for me, because I've always jumped into things like van life, and then the PCT journey just kind of followed that. So I think, yeah, just that typical 9 to 5 I've always just pushed away from. So it was no surprise that I went and did something big like this, hiking on the PCT for 5 months. But yeah, like to have the process it still, like to have the opportunity to even do that, like in especially at 30, I turned 30 on the trail. It is quite a once in a lifetime experience. And hopefully I can eventually do something big again like that because, being out there for that long and being off my screen, off my phone and having time in nature, like it was like very healing for me in a lot of ways. And like my mindset shift on a couple big things, like potentially having children and things like that. And just like my relationships with my family and my friendship relationships and my relationship within myself. Like, there was a lot of things that I was able to like process on the trail because I had enough time to just walk and think about it for 5 months straight. So honestly, yeah, it is an interesting thought for sure.
So it sounds like it's safe to say that your time on the trail was mildly transformative.
I would say, yeah, like I'm not like some big philosopher, you know what I mean? Like I'm not gonna be like, wow, like I'm like a totally new person and like it was like those things, but like yeah, I don't know, it was just a different cool experience for me and like there were some things that came out of it which was really awesome and special and I'm glad that I got the like opportunity to be able to like process these things I never would have processed if I just like lived a typical normal lifestyle, I think.
So one of the first things I guess I'm curious about is you talk about like some of these maybe kind of different beliefs of how you want to live your life. You talked about living in a van. So for context here, Eileen and I met Dedra and her partner Garen because we both live in vans, and we met them in San Diego a couple of years ago, and that led to us traveling together, and we did a little convoy all the way up to Alaska for the summer, and we spent time together living in our vans, and it was such an incredible experience. From your standpoint, why these paths, choosing to live in a van, choosing to go hike the Pacific Crest Trail for 5 months? What is it about these types of things that appeals to you and that you are drawn to? Because not everyone would be drawn to them in the same way.
Yeah, I'm crazy. I think I had to kind of bring it back a little bit, like kind of my past life, I think, to
Yeah.
like really understand why I do the things that I do. So for context, I grew up like in a very small town. It's called Cold Lake, and it was in Alberta, so I'm from Canada. And a lot of people from small towns, as I'm sure a lot of people know, like they don't know what is outside. They kind of just live in this small little world in this small town. And for me at a young age, I think I was always like drawn to like what is out there. And I think like just seeing kind of my family and stuff stay stationary and like they're happy and they're doing their own life, but I always just didn't want to just live that sort of lifestyle. I always wanted to do something bigger. And so when I got the opportunity actually to go play college basketball, I took it and jumped into that. And that was kind of like my big first like move away from my small town. And I went towards the town of Red Deer, played college basketball for 5 years. And in those 5 years, obviously I got the experience of being alone and getting away from my small town, but I also was closer to the mountains, which then led me into, going out and camping more and hiking more and building that sort of love for Mother Nature and being outside. And then while doing all that, I also got a kind of cancer scare in my thyroid, which ended up being benign, but like for a couple months, they were telling me that it was cancerous. And then we did some further testing and things like that. And it ended up being a benign tumor, which grew like quite rapidly into like the size of a mandarin orange. Like it was quite big, and
Wow.
you could like see it in my neck. But for a while there, I was dealing with a lot of that trauma and stuff that came with that, like mentally, but also physically. The thyroid like deals with your emotions and like kind of like your physical body and things like that. So going through that whole journey of like finding out and then knowing that it was benign and then doing the surgery and things like that, I kind of had this like epiphany, like, oh, like, you never really know how long you have on this planet, right? And it opened my eyes to, just more opportunity to like do something that I wanted to do, like travel. So I actually dropped out of university and didn't finish my diploma or degree. I only got a diploma at Red Deer College in kinesiology. And my partner and I, Garen, we actually decided that we were going to move from Alberta to BC, which is a 14-hour, you know, drive from where all of our family lived to across the country to Vancouver Island, which again was like the second big jump, big leap of faith to step out of our comfort zones and not really listen to the people that were telling us that we were crazy and that, why are we doing this? You're leaving your family, you're leaving your job, your paying job, and they're kind of like, stuck in those mindsets. And I was so ready to like leave because I was in this like depressive sort of like episode and state, and I needed to like get out and do something. So luckily, my partner, was supportive of that, and we in 14 days decided to leave Edmonton where we were living and go to Vancouver Island. And yeah, it just ended up being that like jump that I needed because it ended up being such an amazing experience. We met some of our best friends here. I ended up opening up a dog walking and pet sitting business, which, then also grew me as an individual and become an entrepreneur and dealing with all that stuff. Like it just allowed me to be like more confident. And then that led into building out the van and traveling in the van for a year and a half. And yeah, I think it just like there was a combination of a lot of things that built me up to being able to say yes and taking this big jump into the PCT and stepping out of the comfort zones and not listening to the people that said, we're crazy and we shouldn't be doing these things.
I appreciate that you took it back because I think sometimes it can be easy to look at some of these decisions that people make in life and just kind of assume that like, oh, one day you just kind of wake up and you make a decision like I'm going to go hike 2,000 miles. And I guess it's just a good reminder to reflect on, and that like, there's a series of things, of moments and decisions and beliefs and perspectives that are built over time that ultimately lead to kind of unlocking or, being turning points to decide some of these things. So now, even for me as someone who knows you, it's just kind of interesting to hear you reflect on all of these past experiences that lead to that moment. And that's life, right? It's a culmination of all of the things that we've gone through.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people when they watch someone that's hiking the PCT, they're just like, "Oh, wow, like they took the jump and they did it. Like, wow, they're so brave." But most of the time it takes years for people to actually do something so big. And that was one of the things that I was reflecting on actually was like the accumulation of all those things that built me up to get to this point. To be able to say yes. And I think it was perfect timing. I don't think I would have done it in my 20s, early 20s, mid 20s. I was a much different person, had a different mindset. And so I think it was just perfect timing to do it like, going into a new season of life, hitting 30.
Do you remember the first time you ever thought to yourself, I think one day I might like to hike the Pacific Crest Trail?
I remember, yeah. I mean, so again, like, so while I was going through all those things in life, I actually came across the PCT. Like, I was just scrolling through YouTube's looking at like hiking stuff and camping stuff, and ended up finding someone who, was sharing their PCT journey. And yeah, it was in college actually that I came across the PCT. Like, so I was probably, like 20, 21 when I first came across it. And then, I was always like, oh, that's something I want to, do one day. I think that'd be really cool. And then, life happens and all this stuff happens and things come up that you need to shift and go towards a different direction. And it really wasn't until we were in the van only about a year ago now where I was thinking to myself, like, hey, this might be a good opportunity for me to do the PCT because my partner could just follow me in the van. I could see him and the dogs along the journey. It could give me a peace of mind knowing he's close by. So it really was about a year ago. We were just traveling back, actually, I think from Alaska. And I started kind of throwing it out there to Garen, thinking, hey, do you think we could do this? Could we manage this? Like, obviously he has to say yes too. I can't be the only one that says yes. And yeah, so I think I've always wanted to do it for many, many years, but it wasn't until about a year ago where I was like, okay, this actually could happen sooner rather than later.
I think I remember you as we were kind of ending our Alaska trip or starting the journey back. I remember you talking about it and saying like, I really think this is something that I'm gonna do next year. And it's
Yeah.
of course as friends you're like that's cool, that's great, that sounds awesome. I think it's always easy to be like, well, I don't know if she'll really do it. That's such a big thing, and now it just is so cool to reflect and sit here today and be like, wow, you really did the thing. Okay,
Yeah.
for someone who is listening to this who is not familiar with the PCT, can you just kind of give us a lay of the land of what is the Pacific Crest Trail?
Yeah, I'll just make it really basic. It's basically a 2,650-mile hike from the border of Mexico to Canada. So you start in Campo, like it's in the San Diego area, and you basically hike all the way across towards Washington to get to the Canadian border. It takes about 5 months on average to complete, and that is like the Coles Note version of it. There's a lot of stuff that kind of happens in between that we could also go into detail a little bit more if we want to break that down. But that is the overall arching Pacific Crest Trail.
Okay, excellent. No, that's a good lay of the land just for people who might not be familiar with it.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to ask you was about. I kind of have this saying or believe in the idea that like pursuing our dreams is incredibly inconvenient. I'm curious about, can you speak to some of the like logistical things that you had to overcome or figure out in order to even make the possibility of going on to the trail possible? Because I think it can be easy as an outsider to look at it and make all these assumptions about, oh, well, she must be a trust fund kid or she must, XYZ, all these things. So can you just kind of talk about what did you have to figure out in order to make spending 5 months on the trail a realistic possibility?
That's a good question. And it looks very different for everyone, honestly. I talked with a lot of people through the trail. But for me specifically, I had my marketing job, so I work online, and that's how I make money while I travel. Basically, what I had to do was essentially automate as much as I could with that marketing job. So that was setting up things like blogs and emails and just basically everything automation wise that I could do, advertising, and get 80% of it covered while I was out there. So I spent months prepping 5 months of automations so that the business was running. The other 20%, I had to convince my partner to, manage for me through the week while I was out on the trail. Hey, if we got a customer who was inquiring, with the company, could you respond back to the emails for me? Or the ambassador program that I was running, could you, just send a couple DMs to the ambassadors to keep up that engagement and things like that. So 80% of it I actually had prepped about a few months prior, and then I actually got someone to help me out, which was my partner, to be able to maintain money throughout the whole entire hike. When I was actually coming into towns on my rest days, I actually would do work while I was resting. So yeah, a lot of people think it's really cool that you can make money and stuff on the trail and that I was doing that, but it was quite hard to say the least. I also was creating content along the way, so I was making my own vlogs and things like that to post onto my social media, and also worked with a brand called Zenbivy who sponsored me to hike, and I sort of made money that way, which also was a peace of mind knowing that I had that financial, side route as well instead of just my marketing job. So for me, like financially, I prepped a lot in order to say, okay, I can do the trail because I didn't want to, take 5 months off, just quit my job and then not have anything after the trail and just put all of that like on my partner. So I made it work that way. In terms of like logistical stuff, like I did do a lot of research of the trail, how it worked with resupply, gear, things like that, other people's experiences. And I went out and bought all the gear that I thought would be appropriate for the trail. Ended up actually switching out majority of it like halfway through the trail because it wasn't good. I went the more like cheap route and not the like expensive route. Kind of, a lot of people, go the like ultra lightweight, which is great. And it's, it gives you that longevity through the trail. But yeah, I went the more cheap route and I paid the price. So yeah, like, and there's other people who will just quit their job and, go off of savings and things like that. And it looks very different for everyone. They could be in retirement, right? They could be older. I met a lot of people who were in their 50s, 60s who were in retirement that were out hiking. A lot of people coming out of college that, haven't committed to a career yet, coming out and hiking. So I think it just looks really different for everyone.
But it's cool to hear you talk about different people at different stages in life because it just kind of demonstrates that like this is possible.
Yes.
Everyone's going to have to overcome something different in order to make it possible. But it goes back to the idea of dreams being inconvenient. And if you're willing to prioritize it, if it's important enough to you, there are ways to do it. You talked about some of the sacrifices and some of the planning that you had to make in your individual trail journey and able to make it possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that just feels important to emphasize for people that, you had to overcome things as well to make this possible, and people can do that too.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree 100%.
Did you have particular like goals or intentions coming into this experience?
Yes, definitely. I sort of had like, I don't know if people are familiar with like pillars, core pillars. But for me, I thought there was three things that I really wanted to like focus on and work on within myself. And one of those things was sort of my anxiety and fear of the world. I had like some past kind of traumas and experiences that sort of led me to kind of just being fearful of just people and, men and things like that, and just being alone in the world. And I think for, being in a relationship for 9 years with my partner, kind of like, losing that independence and that, and being more reliable, being more reliable on someone. There's those things that sort of led me into, okay, I want to do this because I want to push my comfort zone and sort of work towards becoming a less anxious and fearful person, because I heard so many like things about your mindset can shift and change a little bit because of, trail angels. You meet so many amazing people out there who help you. I did hitchhiking where I was hitchhiking with random people and you realize, okay, like I'm not going to get like, something bad's not always going to happen if you go hitchhiking. Like there's so many incredible people out here. And I think like the one thing I really wanted to work on was my fear and anxiety of the world. The second thing was, as mentioned, my independence. I was becoming quite reliable on my partner, being with him for 9 years. He basically did majority of the stuff and I sort of just like, lived my life. And so I wanted to see what I could do independently while I was out there on the trail and learn that part of me that I didn't know for many years. And the third one actually was, as mentioned, I played college basketball. So I had this like, I had been missing this drive within myself, like physically and mentally, that, after basically graduating college and not playing the sport, there was a period there where I really wasn't doing much like to challenge myself. And so I wanted to like take this on to see what I was capable of physically and mentally as well. So those were like the three things that I was always kind of thinking about while I was out there on the trail.
Is there a particular, if you had to boil it down to one, I don't know, was there like a pervasive a fear that you had going into the trail that you might identify as like, this is the thing that I was most afraid of?
Yeah, I think it's like quite common actually for a lot of like solo females, is just like, maybe running into someone with bad intentions, that could harm me. And I don't know, like it's just someone that has bad intentions that could harm you, whether that's in town while you're resupplying or out on the trail. that definitely was always kind of like running through my mind a little bit, and also sleeping alone out, at night. That can be a little bit fearful as well. You're just hearing noises and sounds and things like that, and thinking maybe someone's coming to get you, and in reality it's just a bird that's like, just around your tent. So a couple of those things come to mind right away. And then of course like animal encounters, like that's always scary when you're out there alone. There's cougars through the whole entire trail and bears through the whole entire trail. And it's actually quite funny. I didn't see any bears or cougars. And
Which is amazing.
it's amazing. I was out there for like 5 months, and there were so many people. They're like, yeah, I saw a bear, saw a black bear, especially like in through like Tahoe area and things like that in California. And I saw like no bears. I saw a bear scat, but I did not see any animals really, other than like kind of some coyotes and things like that. So those were like definitely a few things that I was fearful of right off the bat.
Which, I mean, makes sense to me. I don't have much backpacking or sleeping outside of experience. I've done some tent camping, but it's also like when you're camping in a formal campground with a lot of other people, that feels a lot different than being out in some remote area in the woods and
Oh
hearing
yeah.
all the noises at night. Like that sounds terrifying to me.
Well, and then you watch like the scary movies, right? Where people are out camping alone in the woods, and then you kind of start getting those intrusive thoughts. And it's just, it's movies for a reason. It's usually not going to happen. Like it's very rare that any of that stuff happens. So yeah, those were like basically my fears.
Hey, it's Chad here, and this is an ad for this show. I want to personally say thanks for tuning in to the podcast. Whether this is your first episode or you've been here for a while, it means a lot that you're here. I'm not asking you for money. Actually, I'm asking for you to take a small action to help grow the show. More specifically, there's 3 things you can do to help grow the show and spread meaningful conversations like the ones that we have here. First is to leave a rating or review for the show on the platform that you're listening on. It takes about 10 seconds and can make a big difference. Number 2 is to subscribe or follow the show on whatever platform you're listening on, just so that you make sure you get notified of each episode that's published. Lastly, number 3 is to share the episode. Whether you send a text to a friend, talk about the episode at your next book club, or make a post on social media, sharing goes a long way to help. So thanks again for listening, and thanks in advance for taking a small action to help the show. Okay, back to the episode. I think one of the portions of the whole experience that I'm most interested or fascinated by is the beginning. I don't know what we would classify that as, but like that first week where all of a sudden, you drive up, and I'm imagining like you get out of the van and it's kind of like, well, okay, I'm going to go start hiking for 5 months now. And I know like there's stops along the way, but walk us through some of your mindset in that first week or the first couple of days or whatever felt, just important at that time. What's going through your mind?
Yeah, I mean, oh gosh, like even a month leading to the trail, I was getting so nervous and so scared. And when it kept approaching and approaching, I was just like, at one point, almost like gonna bail, to be honest, because I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I really don't. This was like the most uncomfortable thing I'd ever done in my life, and like stepped out of my comfort zone. I had really never been alone hiking, never been alone camping, things like that. So when I got to, it's called Campo, which is like where you start. And that's where the southern terminus is actually located. And it was a really surreal feeling being there, because as mentioned, you see so many YouTubes and blogs and things like that with photos and videos of people being in this spot, and you always are like, oh, like I'm gonna, be there one day. And to actually had been there in real life and starting, like it was a surreal feeling, but it also was a very fearful and nervous feeling. Um, and to be honest, I kind of just embraced it. I just, lived in the fear and the anxiety, and I met some people that were there kind of on the initial day that I was starting, and really it just was me putting on my bag, putting on my gear and saying, "All right, Garen, like I'm out, peace." Like I'm gonna go hike now. So yeah, I think just like a lot of surreal feelings and a lot of just like nervousness, but also excitement at the same time, like initially starting. And seeing that like first mile marker and things like that, like it gets you excited and you're out there in the desert, which was like very new for me. Being in the heat and things like that and seeing the rattlesnakes and all of that. So it's very like you get you're kind of up and down a lot. Like you're excited and then you get like, then you're alone walking for, 5 miles, like looking around, being like, oh, okay, I'm actually out here alone. Hopefully nothing goes wrong. So I think that's sort of like was my general mentality in the beginning.
Did you have a I've got to imagine there were many of them, but do you remember like a first kind of, I'm going to call it like an oh shit moment where I'm just imagining there's got to be this, you get out onto the trail. I'm imagining in the very beginning, it's like, whoa, this is kind of exciting. Like you said, it's kind of scary. You're out, you're hiking, you're really doing the thing. Like this is actually happening. Did you have a first kind of like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I can't believe I'm doing this. Like I need to stop, or I gotta quit. Did that come?
Literally the first night. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, literally the first night. So again, like as mentioned, the desert was new for me. So was not used to the heat. I hiked 11 miles that day to my campsite. Also a big hike for me at that time. And got to camp, started feeling ill, shaky, pukey, had like headaches, and realized that it probably was mild heat stroke. And I didn't say anything to anyone. I just sort of set up my tent. There was other people around, and I basically just kind of pushed through, went to bed feeling like crap, basically, and thought to myself in that moment, I don't think this is gonna work out. I was like, I don't think I'm capable of doing this. This is already night one. Things are already bad, like it felt really uncomfortable feeling sick and not having someone familiar there around me. And so I just kind of went to bed and woke up the next morning, packed up my stuff, still kind of feeling like a little like weird about it. Maybe the next town I talk with Garen and, maybe I actually just don't do this thing. And then came around the corner and it was early in the morning and I saw this beautiful like cloud inversion over the mountains. And I just remember this exact moment because I was like, it was the one thing I wanted to see on the PCT was a cloud inversion. And I was like, okay, like this is a sign that Mother Nature is giving to me right now that I need to just see this through and stick it out.
Wait,
So
describe a cloud inversion for us.
I don't know, it's just like a bed of clouds that like kind of like, is just below the peak of the mountain. So as long as you're up high enough, you can kind of see it, but it's just like a basically like a bed of clouds, like in a valley type thing.
I think Eileen and I ran into that one morning in California as well, where essentially it's kind of like you expect the clouds to be up in the sky, but instead the clouds are covering the ground and you can kind of
Yeah.
see above the clouds and you can see the mountain tops and it's kind of like, whoa, this is weird.
Yeah, it's so epic. Like it was like the like I said, the one thing I really wanted to see was the a cloud inversion. So to go from like having that night of being like, I don't know if this is gonna work out and this is, really uncomfortable feelings and to then seeing that the next day, it was just like a totally like, mindset shift from oh shit to oh yeah.
So, I mean, it sounds like that was like your sign.
Yes.
Was the feeling from there just kind of like, okay, I'm in the right place. I can do this. I can make it through. Is that what you sort of took from that moment?
Yes, yeah, yeah, exactly. I was just like, I'm going to do this. Like, this is my sign. This is exactly what I need to see. Like, I'm just gonna kind of keep pushing. This is gonna be hard. I'm gonna have these hard, uncomfortable moments, but I'm gonna see these other signs and I'm gonna see it through basically the whole entire journey. And from there, I really had a pretty solid mindset for majority of the trail after that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, are there more moments that come up? I've got to imagine that to some extent on a daily basis, there's moments where it's just like, ah, what am I doing? Maybe not as far as like I'm gonna quit or I'm gonna leave the trail. Um, but I'm just curious how you sort of mentally or internally like soothe yourself through these different moments, because I've got to imagine, like you said, it's just a mental roller coaster on a moment by moment basis. So what's happening inside the brain, the mind, the body of Dedra that is helping you navigate all of this up and down?
Yeah, honestly, I think for me, it was the aspect of like sharing my journey a little bit too online and kind of getting, you know, the comments and the messages and things like that of people saying they're super inspired by me and it's something that they've always wanted to do and it's a dream of theirs. So not only was I like I felt like I needed to hold myself accountable, I felt like I also needed to do this for other people that were watching me. Which can go like quite a long way. You don't want to let yourself down, but also letting other people down and maybe having that shame, around quitting and things like that. Like, that's kind of what comes with that territory of sharing your journey online. It could
Right.
possibly lead to that, but like it was something that kept me going, just knowing that like I was inspiring other people as well out there, not only myself. There was definitely, moments like you're saying, like the roller coaster of emotions where, like you're out there hiking and you're processing maybe some traumas that you had in your past, like losses and things like that. And those can feel really, sad and uncomfortable in those moments, and you kind of have to like lean in and process them and just kind of keep pushing through, which ultimately like just leads you to being a more stronger individual, which then can get you to the other side, to the Canadian border. And I kind of just kept having these moments of little wins and meeting new people and having these really special memories that just kind of kept me going. And of course, just seeing the beautiful landscapes and things like that. I really like was so immersed in like the most beautiful areas, right? And just being off social media and things like that, like it just I never ever really felt like I wanted to quit ever through the trail. I was really living my dream and like what else
Hmm.
would I want, in those moments.
It's cool to be able to have the perspective and just kind of realize that in the moment, like, wow, I'm doing this. I am living a dream, something that I've wanted to do. I've got to imagine that's very, I don't know, grounding, but also just inspiring. I can
Yeah.
imagine that perspective really propels you a long way.
Yeah, and just like, I don't want to let myself down because I imagine if I had quit, midway through or something, and I think I would have really beat myself up if I did that and looked back and been like, well, you were a little uncomfortable in this moment. Like, why didn't you push, and just kind of keep going? Because then you could have like seen even more and done even more, right? And I think like that was always in the back of my mind. I knew I would regret it if I didn't make it all the way.
Tell me more about this idea of processing. You know, you are spending, now, from my understanding, from your experience, you're not alone all the time. And a lot of, there is a lot of alone time, a lot of time where you are hiking alone.
Yeah.
When you're in that environment where you're by yourself, you're not being stimulated by technology, by social media, by our phones and our laptops. You're in nature. It just provides this opportunity for a lot of quiet time, which I imagine then leads to a lot of reflection, which
Yeah.
as you said, then imagine leads to a lot of processing. I mean, how did that processing feel? I guess first of all, like, did that feel new or different? Just to spend that much time on your own, thinking and reflecting, was that a new experience for you?
Yes. Definitely. I'm like someone who doesn't like quiet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was
When
a
I'm
big
in
change.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was a big change. When I'm in like, when I'm in social settings, I'm a chatterbox and if there's any silent periods, I'm uncomfortable and I'm anxious. And so to then go to the trail and having had all this alone time and hiking, because as you mentioned, like you are with people, like at night and at lunch and things like that, but most of the time you're hiking alone. Um, yeah, having that, it felt very weird in the beginning. Very uncomfortable and because your brain like it's hard when you are starting to process like it wants to go to the negative route. You know what I mean? Like initially, it's for me like especially being out there for like a month, it's like your brain wants to kind of start processing the like negative stuff and the traumas and the bad experiences that you've kind of had in your life and like those moments were tough. Like I had a lot of like crying moments and like, like I that didn't feel good, but like ultimately like I said, like to have that processing time like and to really think about it and dive deep and analyze stuff like and have that opportunity to do it. It really uh changed and shifted my mindset into becoming a more confident individual and it allowed me to actually feel better about some of those experiences and traumas that I did have in my past. So now, if something comes up um about one of those things, for example, as you know, like my soul dog passing away and things like that with Bella, like I don't immediately, I don't immediately tear up. Like I've kind of processed and done all of this stuff and like I can actually like talk about it now with people without like getting too emotional about it. So just being able to have that time to process and do it, it really has healed me in a lot of ways. Um, so I am really, really quite thankful that I had the time to do all that.
Well, it just demonstrates. I mean, how many people have an opportunity like that where they have that much quiet time to process? And like you said, I think it's really interesting how you reflected on, it feels like the mind, and you didn't say this, but I feel like also the body, like it wants us to process these things.
Yeah.
Like you said, the mind like immediately went to these things and was like, hey, let's think about this. And I just kind of think about like the analogy of some of these traumas or these experiences or these things in our life that often are difficult, they are hard. It's like they're knocking at the door and they're like, hey, can you please give me some attention and can you reflect on this and can you learn from it? And it's so easy for us in day-to-day life and in this culture to just kind of busy ourselves and busy our way to saying like, no, not right now, no, not right now, not right now. And then
Hmm.
you get out onto the trail, you're alone, you have all the time in the world, and finally it's like you can't come up with, an excuse or a reason not to face these things. And so now you have to face them. But it's almost like they want to be faced from what I'm hearing you say.
But yeah, from my experience, yeah, definitely. Like I process a lot of the negative stuff, but like I said, it just switched my mindset around and it's like helped me a lot and has actually helped me with my anxiety and things like that around some of those like traumas and experiences. And yeah, I'm very thankful I had the time because a lot of people, like you said, they're used to just like watching a movie or binging a TV show or scrolling for hours on end and you just like kind of get that mush brain, which then doesn't allow you to really process a lot of these experiences and stuff that you might have going on, whether that's 2 years ago from something that's happened or to, your immediate life. So yeah, I'm trying to like keep that sort of like take, not being on my phone immediately in the mornings and not being on my phone in the evenings. And I'm trying to take some of those lessons from the trail into like my daily life now as well.
Did you find yourself building or implementing any sort of like, I don't know, mental and or physical like rituals to help you process these things? Like as you're going through these different traumas or things in your life are coming up, what did the actual processing experience look like or feel like, or did you find a kind of rhythm or pattern that helped you move through some of these things?
Crying?
Hey, that's a great one. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, literally crying, like thinking about it, crying, letting, it all out, leaving my body, letting that negative energy leave and then doing the processing, right? Thinking about it, breaking it down, analyzing as mentioned before, and then sort of switching it to a positive. Okay,
Okay.
I was thinking about this negative thing, right? I let out all that energy out. I processed it, I analyzed it, but now I'm going to switch it to a positive and I'm going to think about something great that's happening in my life currently right now. Or look at that beautiful mountain over there. Wow, like I'm so lucky to be living here right now in this moment and experiencing this. So I think like getting all that energy out, processing, and then just switching it into a positive right away really helped me physically and just smiling and like laughing and, dancing. I did a lot of just like, listening to good music and feeling like kind of alive, in some of these moments. So I think that was more of my ritual and routine with that.
It makes sense, and it to me, like, it just highlights the importance of allowing ourselves to feel and to express different emotions, like you said, to laugh out loud, to
Yeah.
cry, to smile, to just embrace that whole range of emotions, even if there's not always other people in the moment that are, causing, or other situations that are causing you to feel or express those things.
hmm
I've got to imagine it's a really just cathartic experience to just let all of that stuff be felt.
And like, and not feel like you're being judged, like almost in that moment, you have the space and you're alone out there. So there's no judgment, and Mother Nature is cleansing you and you're out there like getting fresh air and the sun and things like that. So yeah, it's a really cool experience for sure.
What was something that surprised you about either, the actual experience itself, about the trail, about other people, maybe about yourself? What was the most surprising thing about the experience?
Yeah, there's a couple things actually that come to mind with that. For me, like I was mentioning, just the like generosity of people and just the kindness of people and what people will do to make your life just a little bit easier. Trail Angels was a thing that we basically get throughout the trail, and Trail Magic. So the Trail Angels put on Trail Magic is essentially how it works. And like what that is usually is food, like burgers, hot dogs, drinks, and essentially like it's just so cool to see like all these people taking their time out of their days to come and sit there and wait for a bunch of hikers trashy hikers, smelly hikers to come and like feed them. And it really brings out like this fun. And like a lot of the times it saves you in these moments. I remember a couple times I was starving and like had low energy and like they just come at the best times, honestly. So I think just like the generosity from people, and like I was mentioning hitchhiking, like you realize like there's more good people out there than bad people in this world. And I think, there's a lot of stuff on social media and movies and TV shows that might make you think like, oh, like you should be, scared of people and, be fearful and not go out and adventure and do these things. But like what that was one thing I learned was that there's a lot of really amazing and good people out there in this world, and you just have to kind of trust your gut and go for it. The other thing was just the resiliency of the body.
Mm.
Because like there was a lot of body, shifts that I had through the whole entire trail. And like I just think like it's crazy sort of what your body can do hiking marathons day after day after day, getting, 7 hours of rest and then doing it again the next day. Like I never experienced anything like that, like physically. So yeah, it just makes you think like how much can we really like push our body and what are we capable of, like. And so it just for me definitely I carry that a little bit too into my daily life of like, what, I can get to the gym, it's no big deal, it's a 45-minute gym class, like I just went and hiked the PCT. So I think yeah, just that resiliency of the mind and the body is crazy. So those are the two immediate things that came to mind.
Yeah, those are Great shares. I appreciate it. I've felt on a very, small scale, especially that second one, as far as like the body's ability and how it's our mind that gives up first, and it's our mind that convinces us that our body cannot do it. But it's really amazing and rewarding to see and to kind of test and to challenge ourselves, because we are incredible animals, species, and the things that we can do. But so often we just don't give ourselves the chance to actually demonstrate and perform and showcase, I think, what we're capable of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was such a cool experience, like to be able to feel that. And like I said, it was something that I really wanted to see, like from one of my core pillars was that drive within me to see what I was capable of physically. And I definitely have found out what I'm capable of. Um, I'm a strong, like I feel like I'm more confident and a strong individual than I ever have been in my whole entire life. And it's just really cool, like, going into a new season, being 30 and things like that. I feel like there's so much more I'm going to be able to do. And I want to just kind of keep pushing myself to just becoming a better version every single day as best as I can.
So you already have in some ways, as we reflect on those three pillars that you shared in the beginning of the conversation, changing some of your relationship to being kind of afraid of people or being skeptical of people, being alone on the trail and some of that dependency, and then also like the physical challenge. I mean, as you look back on those three pillars, now having accomplished the trail, how has your relationship with those three things changed, or what's your perspective on, do you feel like you, I don't know, made progress in those things, or as you reflect on them, what comes up?
Yeah, I feel like I definitely made progress on all of them. To a certain degree. Like I definitely challenged myself in all those pillars and all those aspects. And I will say, like, since being back and finishing the trail, like some of them, like, some anxiety stuff and maybe a little independence is kind of creeping back, like, oh, like I felt anxious in some like social settings for whatever reason, or going to I just started doing a trail running club, and my first time going there, I was so nervous and like had some weird anxiety. So there's still that creeping in a little bit, but I would say for the most part, I'm like way less um anxious and nervous and things like that with new experiences. As far as independence, I think I grew so much through the trail and still carry that into my day to day now. Little things like doing laundry and dishes and cooking and meal prepping, like things that I would never really do before. But now it's just like I have no excuse. Like, I am capable of so much, and like I grew so much on the trail, and I like my independence, and I don't feel like I need to always rely on my partner. So I think like that has carried on for sure into my day-to-day life here. And then as far as my athletic drive, like I have so many big plans and things like that I want to do. I'm already training for an ultra marathon as we speak. So, pushing my body there. I'm going to the gym daily. And I'm really just keeping up with the physical aspect as well from the trail. So that would be some of my experiences with those.
Yeah, I mean, it's so cool to hear you reflect on those. And I mean, based on this conversation, it's not a surprise that this experience is going to have those sorts of things. As I was hearing you, I was thinking about how, like, from my experience, and I'm curious if you kind of view it the same way, it's not necessarily that these different things in our life will, if we have these tendencies to be anxious, or we have tendencies to maybe be skeptical of people, going through things, experiencing things in life doesn't necessarily just remove those things, but it provides more evidence that, like, okay, this may be true. We may feel anxious. We may be skeptical of people. And now we have more evidence, more data of the fact that we can also overcome this. And it can be less kind of debilitating in the moment to go through these certain things. Is that kind of how you're seeing it or experiencing it? Like, okay, maybe some of these things aren't totally gone, but now I feel better equipped to overcome them.
Yeah, exactly. You nailed it. You took the words right out of my mouth, Chad.
All right, there we go. As you look forward, I'm just curious about, like, after going through an experience like this, what about your life is either different now, or do you imagine will be different? You kind of talked about, I mean, are you coming off the trail like, I'm just going to rethink my entire life? Is it more like small shifts? Like, you spent 5 months hiking every single day, practically.
Yeah.
What is it like coming out of that experience, and what changes are you seeing, or do you foresee yourself making as a result of this experience?
Yeah. I think for me, some of the big changes I think I just like I was saying, like I want to keep some of those like values and lessons that I learned like still kind of into my daily life, whether that's being off of my phone a little bit more, being outside as much as I can and getting that like healing from the outdoors. But also I fear that doing such a grand big thing is going to keep pushing me to want to keep doing something bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's sort of like where my mentality is right now since the trail is working towards something that's, going to push me again and is going to be this big thing that not a lot of people get to do in their life and experience. And I kind of want to always keep working towards these huge, big accomplishments, not only for myself, but also to inspire other people to get out there and do it themselves as well. So, yeah, I fear that I'm going to want to keep doing something bigger and grander, and that eventually is going to have to come to an end. But right now, I'm already prepping to do, some other through hikes and some ultra marathons and just kind of keep pushing myself physically, mentally, and keep growing as an individual.
What's the fear? You're saying, I fear I might want to continue to challenge myself and kind of one up myself. What's the fear there?
Well, I think it's mostly from like not my point of view, but maybe from my partner's point of view or maybe my family's point of view, because they were all a little nervous for me on the trail and things like that.
Okay.
And they didn't get much sleep and things like that through the trail, and they just never really understood it. So when I'm telling them, "Hey, I'm already planning to do something else again," they're saying, "No, you're crazy, and maybe you should like, chill out for a bit and settle down." But for me, I fear I'm not gonna be willing to do those things, and I'm gonna want to keep pushing and doing bigger and grander things, which is gonna be great for me, but not great for them.
Yeah, I mean, how do you balance some of the internal desire, some of your dreams versus some of the feedback or thoughts or opinions that you get from people that are close to you? How do you navigate that?
You know what? I listen and take it in and soak it in and try to think about it from their point of view and their perspective. And um I obviously don't want to just go do these things without, asking people and telling people and people that are close to me and letting them know. Um, but I've always just been the person that even if someone tells me like you shouldn't do this, like it really motivates me more to go and do it. And I always just want to keep stepping out of my comfort zones and being a bigger and better person and not falling into, the trap of the regular 9 to 5 kind of norm lifestyle. So I listen to them and I soak it all in and I say, great. But then, but then I say, okay, I'm going to go do it anyway. And that's just how I've always been. And of course, like, if I always take into account my partner to what he's thinking, if it's okay, for him as well, because, he has to take on a lot of responsibility as well with finances and taking care of our dogs and things like that while I'm out doing these things. So I always, really appreciate that as well. And I let them know how much I appreciate them and that they're crazy for always allowing me to go and do these things, but I appreciate it.
Well, I mean, I admire your ability to kind of to take in people's thoughts, opinions, feedback, and ultimately decide what it is that makes the most sense for you and what you would like to do. I admire you for that, because I think it can be so easy for us to get bogged down in what other people have to say and what they think. And, it's a good reminder for me, and I try to practice of just like you said, hearing what people have to say. Typically, it's coming from a place of love. It's coming from a place of, and it's also coming from a place of a lack of understanding, where it's just like, if someone hasn't been faced with a similar goal or desire or dream, well, then of course they're not going to necessarily see the value in doing something like this. And that's okay. It doesn't make them right or wrong. It's just people have different priorities in life, and people want to do different things. And so I admire you for knowing what it is that you want to do and kind of planting your flag and saying, I'm going to go do that stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna go do it anyway. No, yeah, no, you're right. You're exactly right.
What is as we wrap up our conversation, I mean, what would your message be to someone? Maybe they want to go hike the PCT at some point in their lives, or maybe for them, their version of the PCT is something else in their life that feels like it's a dream. It feels like it might be challenging. It feels like there's no good time to do it. All of the things that you kind of dealt with before this experience. Mm-hmm. What would be your message to that person as you look now on the other side of things?
That's a tough question. Yeah, I think just go do it, honestly. Like, you're going to be scared. You're going to overthink things. Like, people are going to be yapping at you saying, don't do it. Like, but if it's a big dream of yours and, you have the opportunity to be able to do it, like, jump on it and just do it and just go into the fear and the unknown. And most of the time, it's always going to work out anyway. That's kind of my sort of message. And again, just don't overthink it. Like, like for the PCT specific, a lot of people really do a lot of research and planning. And I think with my experience, you don't really need to do that. You just kind of have to go with the flow and just go with it. So yeah, I would say just go do it. Push your boundaries, push your comfort zones. You will not regret it. And yeah, live out your dreams. That's my message.
I think that's great. I think it's a great message. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for processing with me and with us, with anyone who might be listening. I think it's just really neat to reflect with you on this journey that you've been on. And it was cool to kind of be able to cheer you on and see your progress and hear from you throughout your experience. And now it's really neat and meaningful to reflect on it with you. So from a friend standpoint, again, I just want to share that I really admire your commitment to this, your approach to it. I admire the mental and physical fortitude that I can only imagine it took to go through this entire process. So I really see that in you. I'm inspired by what you have done, and I trust that many people listening to this will feel the same way.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Dedra, if people want to find you, keep up with your journey, keep up with what might be next, what challenges you're thinking about taking on next, what might be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I'm posting a lot on Instagram. It's route, ROUTE _to happiness, TO happiness, on Instagram. And TikTok is the same. It's the route to happiness. And I'm just going to be working now on some more long form YouTube videos as well. The route to happiness, it's all the same kind of across all platforms. So I'll be sharing my PCT journey on there if you want to see some more long form content. But right now I'm still actually just finishing up some short form stuff on Instagram and TikTok. And so that's where you can find me immediately. And then YouTube. We'll see some more long form content shortly soon. So those are all my platforms. Excellent.
Dedra, thanks so much for joining me on the show. I appreciate it. Hey, thanks for tuning into the show this week. If you are listening in December of 2024, when this episode is first airing, Dedra is currently posting on a weekly basis all of her videos, her vlogs from her experience hiking the PCT. And I guess if you're listening to this sometime in the future, you can also go on YouTube and find these vlogs. But I would encourage you to go check them out. Eileen and I have made like a movie night. They're maybe 15 minutes or so each, but it's fun to be able to see what this experience was like for her. And she kind of, she documents what she goes through on a daily basis, and she checks in about certain things that she's feeling, and you just feel like you're on the trail with her. So I encourage you to go check out her YouTube channel. I have it linked in the show notes, and you can follow along in her journey with Eileen and I. If you enjoyed the show, leaving a rating or review on whatever platform you're listening on would really mean a lot to help me grow the audience, and get these conversations in front of new people. Thank you in advance for being willing to do that and supporting meaningful conversations like the ones that we have here. And I'll see you in future weeks with more episodes.